Food banks, supply chain optimization to deliver more to more. The problem I chose to study is the disconnect between the food waste we generate and food insecurity. With an estimated additional 3 billion mouths to feed by the end of the century, we need to repurpose food waste. According to the United Nations, we have the ability to feed every hungry mouth and more, yet we still manage to waste 72 billion pounds worth of food. Common causes of food waste include overproduction from the start, such as demand forecasting to predict trends, sales, and preferences, overconsumption on the buyer's end, including overbuying and large portion sizes, affluent choices, choosing the perfect products over the imperfect, food labels, strictly following expiration dates that don't necessarily mean the product is unusable, as well as natural decay. There is an oversupply of food, yet we manage to waste a high percent while people go hungry. Therefore, according to Martins, a shortage in food supply is not at the root of the problem of food insecurity. The real challenge lies in distributing the available food equitably among those people in need of food assistance. Food banks are a great repurposing solution in the meantime. They primarily solicit food and grocery products from a variety of sources, receive and store the products in a warehouse, and distribute it to those in need through charitable agencies. While food banks cannot solve hunger and food insecurity, they can certainly combat it. I therefore researched how to optimize food bank supply chains and their practices so they can effectively serve more food to more people through these two questions. If we can facilitate our supply chain and techniques to preserve food so that it has a chance at survival and repurposing through food banks, can we promise a wider availability to those in need and work to reduce the overall levels of hunger and food insecurity? I also investigated what are the best practices for food rescue agencies for sharing the impact of donations. A supply chain in its simplest form is the flow of goods, information, and funds to transform raw materials into finished goods. So without the flow of information, it's incomplete. I therefore believe that the flow of impact and information is just as important to study to help avoid the donor out of sight, out of mind mentality, and to encourage continuation of the relationship to benefit the greater good. In summary, I will explore the tangible and intangible supply chain in the lens of food waste and rescue, how the tangible food product flows from donor to agency, and how the intangible understanding and impact flows from agency to donor. According to the Food Bank of Western Massachusetts, the area is home to several counties in which 1 in 10 people are food insecure as of 2019. With COVID, it's estimated that now 1 in 6 people will be experiencing that same insecurity. Food waste prevention and food rescue therefore desperately need more attention to mitigate such hunger in the area. So I chose to focus my efforts on Rachel's Table, a food bank operating in Springfield, Massachusetts, and servicing that Western Mass population. With 200 volunteer drivers, Rachel's Table matches donors to agencies and distributes on average 70,000 pounds each month in their traditional 6-day rescue model pictured on top. Rachel's Table serves as the middleman, connecting donors to agencies and responding to the needs of the community. Rachel's Table and then their immediate partners are the subjects of my case study, allowing for an in-depth understanding of their food rescue supply chain. Interviews were conducted with 3 food donors on the left, Bimbo Bakery, Donor Participant 2, and Delaney's Market, as well as 3 agencies on the right, Amherst Survival Center, First Pioneer Valley Dream Center, and Franklin County Community Meals Program. It's important to note that this diagram pictures just the involved participants. In reality, it's a one-to-many and a many-to-one relationship in which donors may provide donations to several agencies, and agencies may receive donations from several donors. In the study, however, data was shared by participants in context of their wider food rescue operations. The reasoning behind capturing such a large data set was to gain a clear picture of the practices these organizations currently implement, regardless of who they partner with. Because all these groups are working in tandem to support one common goal of reducing food insecurity, information on best practices should be shared among them to increase their individual and collective successes. In support of the first research question, data was provided by both the agencies and donors on 1, food waste by the numbers and factors, and 2, food donations and their storage and transportation techniques. These figures were helpful in determining the organization's effectiveness of their techniques in limiting food waste and increasing food availability. In support of the second research question, data was provided by both the agencies and donors on 1, the effort level, or frequency and channels used for sharing and receiving impact based on agency or donor status, respectively, and 2, impact reception by food donors. For example, is the impact being reached and understood by donors? These figures help determine the effectiveness of impact sharing techniques in reaching the food donors to encourage the potential of their continued relationship. For analysis of the tangible flow of food products, Bimbo Bakery has the lowest reported waste out of the 3 donors. It's important to note that these numbers are estimates and not directly comparable to other organizations, as each site defines waste differently. Unique to Bimbo Bakery, however, they reduce their food waste primarily through multiple sales avenues, starting at the supermarkets for full retail price, then to local farmers and thrift stores for a discounted price, and finally through donations. Donor participant 2 could not report exact figures, but they have seen a drastic decrease in food waste after coordinating a second pickup date with Rachel's Table to capture all perishable items. That food is also strategically delivered to a nearby agency for more immediate consumption. Delaney's Market uses a 3-month freezer shelf life policy in which the food is still deemed as safe and good quality. They also mention an efficient tracking system in which employees are trained to chart food temperature and the froze-on dates. The 3 donors in green on top all have relatively low food waste percentages compared to the agencies. Assuming all else equal, food is wasted more at the agency site as food is already on the verge of going bad, while each of their number 1 reasons for food waste is that it's already going bad. Most notably at Amherst Survival Center is that they would go by a policy of would you serve it to a guest and not would you eat it yourself. While the food recipients deserve a certain quality standard for their food, the policy leaves much room for subjectivity in determining whether food can be salvaged or not. Similarly, First Pioneer Valley Dream Center sees roughly the same amount of waste, but she uses more FIFO or first expired, first out methodologies, in which food that looks like it needs to be served right now gets served. With the lowest percent food waste of the 3, Franklin County Community Meals Programs keeps perishable food around until mold or rot becomes physically visible, seemingly more objective than the policy at Amherst Survival Center. They also have just purchased a refrigerated van, which allows food to be carried in stable conditions in larger quantities across greater distances. Moving on to the intangible flow of impact, when asked how they receive impact reporting, Ryan from Bimbo Bakery expressed that he is reached by agencies through a few different communication channels, but that he prefers personalized letters and a certificate he received from the Food Bank of Western Massachusetts. He framed the certificate in his facility and is constantly reminded of the impact he is making. The business's primary motivation is to give back to the community. Donor participant 2 receives no communication, but he would appreciate informal reporting on a quarterly basis so that he can determine how much food he actually donates. Roberta from Delaney's Market had a similar preference for reports that express community need and their impact. Currently, she only hears verbal feedback in passing from Rachel's Table's drivers. Their motivations include supporting the community and maintaining a positive reputation. When asked how they share impact, Amherst Survival Center and Franklin County Community Meals Program both use informal and infrequent reporting. Rachel noted that the agency can't always prioritize reporting to food donors because food distribution is at top priority, as well as communication with financial donors to allow the nonprofit agency to stay afloat. Diana from First Pioneer Valley Dream Center leverages social media and tagging to informally report impact to her food donors. In doing so, donors can interact with the post and share it within their own network. All 3 agencies have opportunities to improve their impact sharing techniques to increase effectiveness of reaching those food donors meaningfully. I next take a look at the best practices. This chart is divided into the tangible and intangible best practices determined from the study based on the numbers that are supported by anecdotal evidence. The studied best practices are then compared against industry research best practices. For the tangible, a refrigerated van would allow delivery drivers to pick up frozen food donations in larger quantities and make less trips, thus optimizing the process for food bank rescue and reducing environmental impact on the cars as well. Franklin County Community Meals Program has already invested in this, and 2 out of the 3 donors freeze their food to prolong shelf life. A secondary piece of equipment used in industry practice is the intelligent container, or packaging using sensors to monitor temperature deviations, as falling in and out of temperature control worsens the food quality. A potential market solution with a sensor embedded in a smartphone that can be held up against a food package to identify spoilage gases could also be a worthwhile investment. Unfortunately, these tools are expensive. However, funding from financial donors or through grants could be the next opportunity for participants like these to better their supply chain through smarter equipment and technologies. The intangible supply chain is a secondary priority for most agencies. However, when the opportunity comes to refocus and refine their impact reporting methods, these are some industry best practices, including visual representation of public posting, such as the social media tagging that First Pioneer Valley Dream Center uses, and personalized communication, such as the letters and certificate that Ryan from Bimbo Bakery has received. If these best practices can be tested and shared with these organizations, their efforts can become more streamlined and efficient in terms of achieving their common food rescue goals. As in any process, information sharing is key to ensure that all stages are coordinated to run effectively. Especially in a crucial process such as this, sharing any successes or pieces of wisdom can send a ripple effect throughout the supply chain. The goal of the study was to investigate current practices of these participants regarding their tangible and intangible supply chains, and then to determine the best practices and share such success with other participants in hopes of optimizing the food rescue supply chain as a whole. I wanted to share this quote from one participant. As a newcomer in food distribution, the interview was very helpful. It gave me a lot to think about and pointed out areas that I plan to review with our team. Diana's sentiments prove the potential resourcefulness of the study and what these participating organizations can learn from each other. With knowledge of best practices and recommendations, Rachel's table can leverage the data to share with their stakeholders so that they can build a more successful network. In the larger context of food rescue and food waste, I hope my investigation and analysis of the tangible and intangible supply chains can improve efficacy in order to maximize food rescue efforts for not only Rachel's table, but for other redistribution organizations, while potentially mitigating their community's food insecurity levels by being able to deliver more to more. Thank you.